what is truth like exactly in context of this play that is a different version of a life that she imagines for a loved one. Hey there, and welcome back to No Script, an unscripted conversation about theater's best scripts. I'm Jacob. I am joined by Jackson, and we are delighted to be here today for another conversation about theater, about storytelling, about all those great things, and a conversation today that is not about an adaptation, which is just a little break in what we got going on. Just a 1 week break because we are coming from adaptation month, our themed month of the season, and we are looking towards our special guest episode next week, which is about an adaptation in kind of multiple levels in multiple ways. So this is a 1 week reprieve to discuss a wholly original play by Tina Howe, Pride's Crossing.
Yes, excited to return to Tina Howe on the show today. And yeah, a little bit of a palate cleanser, a sorbet before jumping into next week's conversation, which is very exciting around the special guest episode that you got to have this time, Jacob. Isn't that right?
Yes, this is a conversation I recorded, as of the recording of this episode, just about a week ago, and I'm still thinking about it. It was a fabulous conversation. So many of the guest episodes are. This is no exception. It's a conversation that taught me a lot about adaptation work, which is one of the things close to my heart. It was a great conversation about one of, if not the most famous playwright of all time. Hint, hint, nudge, nudge, about who that might be. You probably have a pretty good guess at that one, as well as working with like somebody who has gained a lot of traction for the work that they're doing right now in the creation of new pieces of theater. Really fabulous. I hope that you check it out. Coming out next Monday, a week from the date that we're releasing this episode, special guest episode for season 15. We will hopefully see you there.
Yes, buckle in for that one. That's an exciting one. And then also prepare your soul for the end of our season, which is rapidly approaching. So there's a special guest episode next week, and the week after that, we do our kind of final episode of the season, and then we kind of take our winter break. We go through the holidays, and then we'll be back sometime in the new year as we get to continue having great conversations. But over the holiday season, we'll all be taking a break, and we will be excited to be coming back after that.
Yeah, that's right. Only a few more episodes this season. Never fear. We'll be back after a winter break. But today is not that day. Today we have a great script in front of us by a really great playwright, Tina Howe, recently passed. I'll talk about that a little bit in the context section, but was just a giant of the American theater, was really one of the major playwriting figures in the American theater, and it's always a delight to look at a new one of her plays. This was new to me upon picking it up. I had known about it because of its the way it was featured and what happened the year that it was up for the Pulitzer Prize, which I'll also talk about. But it's not one of her plays that I'd picked up. I've read many Tina Howe plays, and so when you've read Tina Howe plays, you certainly have an idea of what to expect. And the idea of what to expect is that you have no idea what to expect. That is the feature of Tina Howe. And that was no exception. This play was surprising at turns. It's baffling in places. It's deeply romantic in places. It's also like the reading experience and the live experience, very, very different kinds of things going on, which I'm sure we'll get a chance to talk about. It's that kind of play where the story is ethereal, it's moving in ways that you can't quite describe, and the experience that she's built for you to have in the room is also magical, and you know that as you're reading it.
Yeah. This is one that, like, kind of reading it on the page are these sort of like dialogic scenes between each other. But some of the action is very magical. Some of like the prop work is very magical. There's lots of props appearing in one scene that are important in another scene, and there's definite resonances there. This is another play. I'll kind of say this when we get into the summary as well. This is another play that kind of is concerned with two different times. If you've been listening along in the season, last episode as well, we were doing a play, the Oregon Trail, that was about two different times running concurrently with each other. So kind of interesting there as well to kind of be dealing with those two things, and excited to kind of find get the chance to talk about the themes that resonate in this play.
Yeah, I don't envy you having to do the summary on this play. It's
Yeah.
it's a little bit hard to tell you exactly what the story itself is, because it's not like a cohesive linear narrative in any kind of way. It's really about Tina Howe describes Pride's Crossing as a memory play,
Right.
which, if you assume that she's referencing the definition of memory play that you find in like Tennessee Williams, means that there is something going on that is inherently non-linear, that is a moving back and forth between things that kind of messes with the forward action in a way. But also, because of how Tina Howe imagines that working, you get a different kind of linear story. I think that'll be fascinating to talk about.
Yeah, for sure. The way it informs the ongoing action of the play is really interesting. So yeah, I'm so excited for that conversation. Before we jump into that conversation, though, wanted to take just a second and say thank you to all of our patrons over at patreon.com/noscriptpodcasts for being patrons of the show. Thank you all. You all rock. Thanks for being a part of the show and being sure that we get to do cool things like the last theme month that we were in, and the upcoming guest episode, and all the conversations that we have throughout the now 15 seasons of No Script. If you are looking for a way to get involved in No Script and just help out the show, Patreon is a great way to do that. You can head over there and find a number of different tiers of patronship, the lowest one being just $1, $12 over the course of the year. And you can find a number of great things over there, including Patreon-only posts, advanced access to scripts in certain seasons of the season. So if you're looking for a way to be a part of No Script and just help out the show in a really impactful way, you can head on over to patreon.com/noscriptpodcast. Thanks to all of those who have already done so, and we will see you over there.
And now back to the script.
Here we go.
Okay, so as I said, Tina Howe passed away in 2023, and so concludes one of the great playwriting careers that you'll ever have. We have talked about Tina Howe before, so I'm not going to go into too much detail other than to say, since the last time we talked about a Tina Howe play, she's won the 2022 Dramatists Guild Lifetime Achievement Award, and certainly there are very few playwrights that deserve a Lifetime Achievement Award more than Tina Howe. What she's contributed to what drama is, as well as to the library of American dramatic literature, which is just so rich. I do want to read to you just a small section from Playbill's obituary of Tina Howe, just as a moment to honor the legacy of this playwright. Playbill describes her as a playwright known for her ability to enfold the art world into her work. Ms. Howe's plays are often considered extensions of the absurdist tradition, with emotions heightened in the face of increasingly improbable scenarios through which her quirky cast of characters must navigate. Her many honors include a Guggenheim Fellowship, an Obie Award for Distinguished Playwriting, the Rockefeller Grant for Distinguished Playwriting, the American Academy of Arts and Letters Award in Literature, the Penn Lara Pels Theater Award for Master American Dramatists. As I said, it's hard to envision a more robust, well-lauded, and prolific and highly contributory career in playwriting. She's a master. She was a master of playwriting. It's a great honor to approach any of her scripts. This play in particular won the New York Drama Critics Circle Award for Best American Play. It was also a finalist for the 1997 Pulitzer Award for Drama. Now, when I say finalist, usually that means that like a different play won. But this was one of those years when there was no award given, which is always a very peculiar thing. I confess that I don't quite understand why the Pulitzer Prize committee does that, and especially because it ends up seeming like a negative thing. Like these plays were all good enough to be finalists for the Pulitzer Prize, but none of them were good enough to win the Pulitzer Prize. I find that that is not a decision that I am with the Pulitzer Prize committee on. I wish they would give an award to the best play, every year. So that's an odd one. But finalist for the 1997 Pulitzer Prize for Drama. And then in 1998, Howe ended up winning the Susan Smith Blackburn Prize, largely on the back of this play, you would think, given its 97 premiere. It received its premiere at the Old Globe Theater in San Diego in January of 1997, ends up transferring to the Lincoln Center off Broadway that same year. It has a bunch of productions since then. It's been more than 20 years. It's had a fabulous life. Places like Theater Works, Silicon Valley. There's a revival off Broadway at the T. Schreiber Studio in 2004. Many universities have done it. Places like Trinity University in San Antonio, Lipscomb University, Northern Arizona University just did it last year in 2025. The Commonweal Theater in 2016 in Minnesota produced it. It's one of those plays that's a little bit, it's a large cast. It's got great acting challenges. And because of its imagination as this kind of fluid memory play situation, can have, I think, about as much or as little technical complication as you really want. There's some essential props, but and costumes are important, but I don't know that I certainly don't think that elaborate settings are very important. And even some of that in the way that memory and the kind of fading memory of the protagonist works, may or may not be super essential. So it's a great play for a large cast with great acting roles, and that's certainly reflected in its life so far.
Yeah, for sure. It's a lot of great roles to get to kind of jump into. You get to do some like kind of period acting in it as well, which is great, while also doing contemporary acting. So yeah, it's a great piece for all those reasons and all the reasons Jacob already said with the context there. I'm going to give it just a brief summary of this play, pretty brief. Again, this is a play with two different time periods being talked about. One of those time periods is
either 2 or like 30,
Maybe.
Like...
yeah, I suppose. That's true. Two different moments in her life moving. No, there's still like 30 of those.
Yeah, two different like linear progressions.
Right.
But over two very different spans of time. One of them's like 2 days. One of them's like 50 years.
Yep. For sure. Yep. Well, regardless, we meet the main character. The main character is Mabel. Mabel Tidings is her first name, and then Mabel Bigelow as well, after she was married. But we start with her in 1997, and she's in her 90s. She's a very old woman, and she lives in Pride's Crossing, Massachusetts, and kind of notably has a kind of exciting event happening in which the one member of her family that she is still in touch with, her granddaughter and her great-granddaughter, are coming to visit her. And kind of corresponding with that is the 4th of July, and she's wanting to put on this sort of croquet event, kind of in the manner of what she used to experience as a child. She grew up in a pretty well-to-do Massachusetts family. She still lives on the grounds, though, in a smaller house than the estate that she used to live in. So she's wanting to kind of throw a sort of a whimsical croquet party like she used to experience in her youth. We find out a number of things about her in this first scene, but we also meet Vita, her kind of live-in housekeeper, or at least like frequently around housekeeper, and her son West, who comes in. West is kind of having a hard time. He's kind of floats through, but he's kind of getting beat up in the community and kind of rolls in and out of a couple scenes. But then we also meet Chandler as well, and Chandler is kind of a long-term friend of hers. And so once we kind of meet this crew of people, we kind of establish this relationship with them, and then we jump all the way back into Mabel's childhood, and we start to get a little bit more of kind of her growing up in Pride's Crossing. Her father Gus and her mother Maud, her two brothers Fraser and Phineas, both have a lot more kind of freedoms than she does. Especially the older brother is kind of the beloved one, while the younger one is kind of the rebel of the group. But especially the older brother, I believe, who is Fraser, is a swimmer. And I'm
It's Phineas. Phineas, yeah. Phineas, the older brother, is a diver, and a fabulous diver. There's apparently some grand poet, I think Chandler's dad, who wrote this amazing poem about his diving. So it's all very, romantic and grand. And Fraser, the younger brother, quite jealous of the older brother, and he's about to be even more jealous when he learns of Mabel's hopes and dreams.
Yes, yes. But along with her brother as a swimmer, Mabel is as well. And so she kind of begins, Pride's Crossing, just sort of a little bit of an aside, is on 2 lakes. So like it's a big sort of thing that like the community is around lakes where swimming can happen. And so like that's kind of the given circumstances of the area that they're at. And so they kind of slowly begin to discern that Mabel has this big wish to go and swim the English Channel, and be just like her brother Phineas, as a strong swimmer. And that's kind of we learned some things about the family. We learned that Gus is probably on his way to being an absent father and sort of has different ranks for his children. Maud is sort of trying to be the go-between, the peacemaker between them in this scene. And we kind of learned some about the kind of contentiousness of the family in this one. But then we jump back to 1997. Julia, again, Julia is Mabel's granddaughter, and the great-granddaughter Minty are in, and they're in from France. And they're here. We meet Minty, who is this little girl, kind of staying kind of disorientingly in this old house. There's mice in her bedroom, etc. But there's this kind of lovely re-meeting of them after a long time apart, because Minty has moved over to France, Julia has moved over to France and has been with her husband over there, who she starts to hint that there has been a little bit of estrangement. The husband isn't there. We know that he kind of travels around, and so there's some pain that they are talking about there. Again, 1,000-mile view. We jump back again into Mabel's memories when she's 15. We spend some time with her and the cook Mary and Mary's daughter Prue and their connection there. We have another moment of this kind of family dissonance of like the brothers getting to go do cool things and Mabel being left out of those things and not really wanting to go, but also not being empowered to go and be a part of the things. And so she hangs out with Mary and Prue in the kitchen and hears stories from them and kind of forms this relationship with Prue, the daughter of the cook, who's a little older than she is. And then we jump into 1997 again. Mabel continues to plan for this party that she's having. She's trying to invite all of her friends over, but she's calling the wrong numbers and kind of struggling with the phone and kind of the problem of calling answering machines and the frustration of that when it's hard to tell when someone is talking to you or not. After that, we jump back one more time into scene 6 into 1927, and Mabel is a little bit older, sometime in maybe her teens or maybe late teens, and they're at this big party, and this is the big famous charades scene. If you know anything about this play, you probably remember the charades scene, where the whole family does these kind of ridiculous long poem-based charades that they have to try to get everyone to guess. In the meantime, there is both Chandler is there as well as another character, Anton, and they're both kind of in the process of trying to court Mabel in some ways, and so they're kind of a part of this. But throughout this scene, Gus is absent, the father is absent, and the whole group of them want to go and swim. And the guys are all like, yeah, we're going to go swimming. It's going to be great. We got a long way to try today. They're trying to go further and further. But then in this scene, Mabel confesses that she, in fact, has been swimming and has been swimming awesomely, like continues to get further and further records for what she's swimming. And she goes up against her mother, Maud, who insists that she can't do this anymore. But Mabel kind of claims her power and says that I'm going to do it. You can't stop me. And eventually I'm going to swim the English Channel. That's the end of Act 1. We hit Act 2 then. We turn to 1997, where Mabel and Minty have the scene of searching for croquet pieces in one of the closets of the house. And in the meantime of trying to find various croquet wickets and things like that, Minty thinks she breaks this trophy, and it turns out this is the trophy that Mabel won or was presented when she crossed the English Channel. This cues a memory of back in 1942, after she had swum the English Channel, between her and her pretty alcoholic husband, Porter Bigelow.
Porter. Yeah, Porter.
Porter Bigelow, who is sort of jealous of her success to some degree, certainly like throws the trophy at one point in anger and sort of drunken anger over his frustration with whatever he's got going on, and also frustration in the midst of their argument, while Mabel is trying to kind of articulate this dissonance that she's feeling, and that they're both trying to deal with yelling upstairs at Emma, who is Julia's mother. And so there's all sorts of more family arguing kind of happening in this scene from the past as well. Then we jump back into the present. We have the croquet party sort of beginning to emerge. Chandler has returned, as well as a number of other of Mabel's friends. They're all getting ready in sort of this playful sort of dress up almost fashion on the 4th of July before the croquet party to follow. We then jump back in time one more time to the funeral of Porter Bigelow, where Mabel meets Prue for the first time in a long time, and sort of surprisingly sees her again. Again, Prue being the daughter of Mary the cook, who was her childhood friend, and they connect after a very long time apart. Mabel having lived quite a adventurous life, but perhaps also there's this sort of unresolved longing that she talks about in there, especially around this trainer David Bloom, who helped her swim the English Channel. We know that Chandler was her trainer for a long time, but David Bloom was this man who had also swum the English Channel. It becomes a little bit more clear that he was also her lover, and there's kind of this question of like, why you didn't go off to France with him at the end of it? Why did you come back and be with Porter? And she kind of talks about what she thought she was supposed to do, how she couldn't break off a promise that she had made, but sort of the wondering around whether or not that could have been different. That scene is followed by the croquet party, which is a sort of a lovely, delightful, somewhat wild, somewhat scary almost scene of these folks all having this wild croquet party out on the lawn on the 4th of July. Eventually, the frivolity sort of moves towards a little bit of kind of disorientingness from Mabel as she begins to talk about memories of swimming the channel, which ends in a scene of her getting ready to swim the channel with David Bloom kind of preparing her to swim, which includes certainly giving advice, but also sort of sensually for sure, kind of using porpoise oil to be like get her ready for the swim, etc. But that turns into sort of a little bit of making out and a little bit of preparing to leave, some like kind of wondering what exactly she's going to do, whether she just wants to stay with David or start the swim. But eventually she does start the swim. And that's the end of the play.
Yes. So, one thing that I didn't mention in the context section, because I wanted to save it until after you'd laid out the story for us. The story about a woman, Mabel, who came from this fairly restrictive, wealthy, yes, but also very patriarchal situation in upscale New England, and who went on to do these sort of fabulous things, right? To be engaged to the the most interesting, most everybody wants this particular guy,
like football
bachelor
star,
the Harvard football star, Yale, whichever one he was, and she goes on to have this other lover in Europe that the husband gets jealous of after a while, and all of these things that kind of stuff is very expected for a female person in this particular class at this particular time. But she also accomplishes this incredible feat of swimming the English Channel. In the imagination of the play, she also breaks the record. Not only does she break the record for a female swimmer ever crossing the channel at the time, but she also beats the record of the guy, David, who she's sort of interested in Europe. And so it's this incredible physical accomplishment that she's been working on throughout all of that timeline of the play. It's a fabulous life, right? She goes on to do all these other fabulous things, and she ends up living, then when she's 90, she's living in this house, and she has these wild friends and all this stuff. So, where does this play come from? Well, Tina Howe says that she wrote this play in large part as a kind of an homage or a reference to her Aunt Mattie, who actually died during the opening run of this play, who was a very, very old woman when Tina Howe started writing it. And she wanted to write a different kind of life for her aunt, who she says in a great interview, she talks about how her aunt grew up in this very restrictive situation in Boston at the time, and that her aunt always felt like a person who was sort of shoved into corners or under stairs, who was never allowed, based on the power structures of the time, to really make much of herself. And so Tina Howe wanted to write for her a happier, different, more adventurous sort of version of her life. She starts in the introduction to my copy of the script. She has this great line. She says, "For some time now, I've wanted to write about the passion of old ladies." And she describes how old women are capable of this incredible rage and this incredible tenderness. And that idea of staging that is part of what led to the play in general. And of course, much of the play is Mabel as a 90-year-old in this great rage and this great tenderness. But that then also, in imagining the life that Mabel had lived up to that point, she wanted to sort of reconstruct a different version of life for her Aunt Mattie, who she says in the same foreword, it's inspired by her, but her Aunt Mattie, never left home, never married, never swam a stroke. So where's the truth, right? And so what is truth, like, exactly in context of this play that is a different version of a life that she imagines for a loved one?
Yeah, and what is the kind of remembering of those moments due to people in those real life situations? So like the scenes that I think draw us into this wondering, right? This wondering around both the love and the passion and also the rage of older women is this relationship between Mabel and Minty. Right. So you have kind of over and over these scenes where Minty, this little girl, is kind of exploring this house, etc. And Mabel has these moments where she both like is sort of scary to Minty. Like the first scene when Minty shows up, she does this like, French style double cheek kiss. And her mom kind of says like, go kiss great grandma. And she does. And Mabel sort of like pushes her a little bit and is like, do it again. That's so lovely. And there's this sort of, this uncomfortability that happens in
she's like coughing
like
into
these.
a napkin.
Yeah.
Like there's some physiological stuff going on that's, I assume, sort of off-putting to the 10-year-old
right.
Minty.
Right.
It's also interesting, in that same interview, Tina talks about how Minty is kind of a stand-in for herself. And she says something to the effect of, anytime in my plays that you see a 10-year-old girl, you can assume it's a stand-in for me.
Nice. Nice. Yeah. Well, the other scene then that really I think leans into it is the finding the wickets in the closet scene, where we kind of flip on a dime, right? So in this scene, Mabel is being very, very kind and very tender to Minty as she kind of searches through the closet looking for them.
They're having a really lovely like connection over all this stuff, this old stuff that she's still got around. It's a very tender scene until
the trophy emerges, and even initially she's kind of reasonable about it. When it turns up broken and Minty is very worried about it, she's like, "Oh, it's fine. Don't worry about it. It's fine." But then there's like some kerfuffle. Julia wakes up and is like, "What are you all doing?" And it kind of like triggers Mabel into remembering the day that the trophy broke. And that sort of prompts a more rage-based response around people trying to help her and trying to interrupt what she and Minty were doing. And so I think
that Minty also accidentally hits her in the foot with one of the croquet balls.
Right.
So there are these combination of like when these really stirring, either positively or negatively, these stirring memories sort of work her up. And then there is also some pain or some discomfort, which there often is. That she's described throughout the play as having fairly advanced arthritis, to the point where at one point Julia, who hasn't seen her in many years, comes and talks about how she can hardly move anymore. And so you imagine that there's pain and discomfort, pretty regularly. And so when the combinations of those things occur, like what is going to be the response? You get these kind of epic blow-ups, and there are many epic blow-ups by Mabel in the course of the play, which I do think is like part of what Tina Howe is doing, is like combating this picture of old women. Now remember, this is a play from more than 20 years ago, but this stereotypical picture of old women as these like quiet, sort of doting, doddering, people. And one of the things that she's doing in a sort of counter exchange to that is she plays a fair amount with King Lear, who is like kind of the classic example of like an old man on stage. It's like an old man play. Well, and what does that old man get to do? Only give one of the most yelly, powerful, raging, storming, screaming monologues in all of drama. I mean, listen,
Right.
as somebody that coaches actors in monologues a lot, I'm trying to get them not to yell. But in the King Lear, Blow Winds monologue, he just gets to scream at the sky for 5 minutes. And so
Right.
she plays a lot on that picture, I think, because that is it's even beyond a stereotype anymore, to be kind of a trope or a kind of a classic character that is available to us, this powerful, screaming old man. And so she gives us, well, what about this powerful, emotionally powerful, vocally powerful, screaming old woman?
Mm-hmm. Well, and
does that make you uncomfortable, right?
Right,
You out
yeah.
there? Are you uncomfortable right now? Well, what about King Lear? You aren't uncomfortable then.
Right, for sure. Yeah, absolutely. It definitely takes takes up space in a really interesting way for that character to exist, and then also like pairs it with like other friends. Like I forget the word. There's a word somewhere in here around like it's not octogenarian, but it's the decade above that. 90-year-old friends who all get to show up and like have this party together and are playful around croquet together for sure. And so there's lots of space in this play being made for those folks and their stories, and then also like within that like powerful character of Mabel, of this woman, it's so interesting that you get the juxtaposed scenes of her being a really like also like in addition to her passion and her fervor and her longing for delight, she's also like a physically powerful person. And so like especially was when she was younger and was able to swim the English Channel, and she was able to beat all of her friends in swimming competitions and things like that. So
well, you're right. I mean, that's one of the major juxtapositions going on in the play between the two timelines, right? Is that in the one timeline, Mabel at 90 is like physically frail's not quite the word I want, but incapacitated to some degree. She can't walk without the walker. There are many of her scenes. There's a fairly restrictive world that she lives in her body. At one point, she needs to turn the lamp on in order to have more light. I think she's writing invitations for her party, and she ends up knocking the lamp over because of the control that she has over her limbs. And then at that point, she's just kind of stuck because there's broken glass all over the ground, and she doesn't have the physical dexterity anymore to navigate out of that physical dexterity. The big croquet party that she wants to throw, that she plans for all play, when she attends it at the end, she attends it in a wheelchair. And so there is that kind of the physical limitations of being that person in that body at that age, juxtaposed with, you're exactly right, the power, the sheer athletic power that she had as a young person. I mean, she is always, from the time that she's 10, the very youngest we see her, I think, is 10, and she is swimming constantly, even then. And then she accomplishes this incredible feat, the kind of feat that her dad says it's like kind of accomplishment that people do just to do it, like climbing Everest, this thing
Right.
that you can accomplish with your body. And so I think you're absolutely right that the central moving back and forth in time, that is part of what the moving back and forth is about.
Yeah, for sure. It shows the difference between the difference, right? But then you have the knowledge that it's the same person. Similarly in a mental way, like the scene with the charade starts off just sort of like kind of wacky, maybe a little bit, certainly to, a 2025 ear. Like the charades they're doing are whole lines of the Jabberwocky, right? But like they have all these poems in their head. It's possible for them to succeed in this charades because they know these poems. They're very intelligent people playing this game together, and that's juxtaposed with the scene before where technology has advanced, where she's trying to call people and struggling with a phone, like struggling to engage with a phone. So you get over and over, these juxtapositions are there, centered on the reality that this is one woman, that you have the chance to see her at multiple stages of her life and open up the I don't know what version of uthy you want to throw in there. Maybe it's empathy, maybe it's sympathy. But you kind of open up that other posture to yourself to engage her story.
Yeah, well, and then of course there's like what Tina Howe is hoping that you do in production that lends itself to that even more, the sort of phenomenological way that the play tells that story. And what that is, I will say, I don't know that you have to do it this way, other than I do think that the script indicates that you should do it this way. That said, it doesn't do so explicitly in stage directions. And so if someone read this play and I think misinterpreted it, but interpreted it in a different way, I suppose you could do it differently. But essentially what's going on is Mabel, across all of the ages, she begins as a 90-year-old woman. We go back to her at 10, then we advance largely linearly through her life, except for the one swimming scene. So all that time is played by a single actor. And so what do you have? You have the same person's body doing all of these things, right? The same, we're supposed to imagine, we're supposed to believe that the same person's body at 10, at like an awkward 14, as she's described, at her physical, her most physically athletical, not athletical, her most athletic prime, as she's about to swim the English Channel, right? And at 90, where her body is really restrictive to her. And so we know, watching, that this is the same actor's body throughout. And Cherry Jones, when she played the role in 1997 to much great acclaim, was only 40. So it's not like they, in that particular production, cast a 90-year-old woman. They cast somebody, approximately in the middle of their life in order to access all those different parts of the life. I think I probably, if given the chance to direct this and the actor to do it, would prefer to cast somebody as close to 90 as I could get, because of what I think that does to the memory parts of the story. If it really is a recognizably older person playing a 10-year-old, playing a teenager, playing in one scene, as she's described, I forget exactly how old she is at this point, but she's become like this extraordinary beauty, is how Tina Howe describes her. I'm sure in no small part due to like the amount of like athletic exercise that she does. And the men that are at the charades party are just smitten with her. And like, what does it do to that memory if the person playing that role is 85, like is as old an actor as you can find that can hold up to do a run of this play?
Yeah. No, there's some really interesting visual juxtaposition there for sure, as well as so in addition to the actor playing Mabel being the one playing Mabel throughout all the years, almost every other character is double cast or playing multiple roles. The only other character that makes this jump that Mabel makes is Chandler. Chandler plays Chandler in all timelines. And so you have a similar thing going on there.
He's really the only like continuing character. I guess Prue, potentially, and maybe Prue was also like 10 and then is 60 something when Porter dies. So you do get these moves across time. And again, I guess I think that it's possible that somebody could see this and decide to cast a child to play young Mabel and then an older person to play old Mabel. The thing that I will say is that the script, usually if that's the expectation, the playwright will write something like Mabel and then child Mabel.
Young Mabel.
Or teenage Mabel, young Mabel, right? To indicate that it's a different it's not a different character, but it's a different actor that should be cast in this part. And that does not happen in this play. And I do think, and all the reviews that I've read, this is how the play is, at least traditionally staged. And I think very much is the intent of what Tina Howe has written, especially based on what we know about why she wrote this play. That great passion and rage and tenderness of older women that is then presented as the result of a full life that became that, she is the person that she was because she became that person.
For sure. Yeah. It's a really interesting way to sort of like put
that's
on...
a real sentence.
I think so. Yeah. Well, it's a great way to put on stage what is sort of like a lived. It's just the way the world works, right? Like this is just true. But because of how we meet people, because of how we interact with people for like oftentimes like 5 to 10 years of their life, and so you get this like snapshot of people that's less common. It's still very, very, very. I guess is very common. The narrative though of people's lives is more sort of like you get them for a little bit, and so you kind of have to piece together what all happened before, and it's only your experience of them in one stage of life that gets sort of held within your experience of life. And so
it's very much the case that like I don't know that this word really quite means what it's supposed to mean in this play, because this is not like a traditional it's not this kind of dramatic structure. But if there's an inciting incident in the play, it's the arrival of Julia and Mindy into Mabel's home. Their coming is part of why she wants to throw the croquet party on the 4th of July, and most of the interactions come with Mindy or Julia, and how their youth, I guess, or how their snapshot, to use your word, of their grandma or their great grandma is what it is now. They don't have any of the knowledge of the person that Mabel used to be. In fact, nobody really, maybe with the exception of Chandler, really knows much about Mabel. I mean, they know she swam the channel, but they ask her all the time about who David Bloom was, and she doesn't want to talk about it, about why she married Porter, and she doesn't want to talk about it. She seems very protective of the decisions that she made, or not interested in sharing much about them. But it's like that experience that maybe many of you out there have had, right? Where like, I only knew my grandparents as old people.
Yeah.
Right? By the time I have any memory of my grandparents, they were old people. And then occasionally you come across a picture of them in their high school yearbook, or in the picture that they took, when they signed up for the service, or their wedding photo. And you're like, what?
Yeah.
What? My grandparents look athletic. What is happening?
Right.
And that is, I think, some of what this play is doing, is like staging that experience.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Staging that experience, and then staging it over such a breadth of time as well. And it's notably all time or all of our, I think this is true, all but one of the flashback scenes are pre-Julia. Certainly, they're all pre-Minty. Because the kind of the only scene that Julia is sort of like probably alive for is the funeral scene with Porter when Mabel and Prue meet again for the first time. So really these two people, the two people who are still connected to her from her family, like are just not around for this like epic 20-30 years of her life that she trains to swim and swims the English Channel and has this romantic relationship and chooses to leave it aside to go back to the one that she was affianced to. And so all of this story is woven into this time before Julia, certainly before Minty. And so it is exactly that, of this like, oh wow, great grandma, that's crazy that you did all these things before I was even around.
Right, and it's like that's how how Tina Howe invented the play, to me, like interweaves with what's going on in the play. Because for Tina Howe, and I'm speaking a little bit on her behalf, and I don't mean to do that, but her Aunt Maddie would be like, the same generation as any of our grandparents, right? And so that she knew her, at least as an older adult, if not an old person, by the time she knew her. And so she imagines for her Aunt Maddie this fabulous other life that she may have lived way back when, right? And she was, fabulously attractive, and everybody was in love with her. And she was brilliant. And at the game of charades, she's able to, do this pantomime to get people to successfully recite, as you said, lines of the Jabberwocky, which, if you don't know, is a nonsense poem. They're not even real words. She's so brilliant and good at that kind of social and clever execution of things. She was a fabulous athlete who accomplished this thing that very few people do, and did it in like a record-breaking time. She had a European lover that everybody wants to know about, but she'll never tell. So I mean, there is this like way in which the story now is encountered maybe differently 20 some years later. But I think what Tina Howe is trying to do is very much set up this story of like the people that we knew at a certain age and the fabulous version of their life that they may have lived.
Yeah, absolutely. The fabulous version, and then also like the struggles of that they overcame to live that life, right? Like she overcomes a lot of struggle with her family. Certainly over the course of her life, she lives through
alcoholic, abusive husband.
Abusive husband. She lives through 3 waves of feminism, right? And she's working on swimming the channel in like an extremely fast time to cross the channel. So there's all these things that you get to hear about that, there's all these hopes that you get to sit down and have that one more conversation, etc., with your grandparents or whoever, to try to get these stories, because they're all in there, and it's be great to be able to go to see a play about their lives, etc. And this play sort of does that in a really interesting way.
Yeah, and so it is interesting to me that the play ends with the scene with David Bloom. It doesn't surprise me very much that the play ends with her wading out to swim the channel. That seems like a resonant conclusion for this particular play. But David Bloom is a new character to us.
Yeah.
And is... we've heard about him all throughout the play. The English person that helped her train for the channel, and who she had this, not really an affair, but she was engaged when she was having this relationship with him while she was training to swim the channel. And so we finally meet him. We finally see him in the flesh after hearing about him. And so there is something to the idea that it is a mystery resolved. We have been waiting to know about this. We finally heard in the older part of Mabel's timeline around the croquet party, she finally told some stories about why she didn't go with him, why she gave that relationship up to come back to Massachusetts and be with the porter whom she was engaged to, and the regret that has stirred up in her life. And that causes her to have this kind of joyous middle finger at the rules of croquet and break down and play this kind of chaotic, fun game of croquet. And that weaves us back in time into this scene where they're on the shores of, I think she swims England to France. So they're on the shores of England, and David Bloom is rubbing her up with porpoise oil so that she can survive the weather and the jellyfish of the English Channel, which is, every bit as sensuous as you can imagine.
Sure, yeah.
And it is this romantic, almost sexual, certainly heart-racing, very physical thing that they have together on the shores of the channel. And this is the kind of scene that makes me, if I were to direct the play, desire to cast as old an actor as I could find for Mabel and Chandler, because I think that having a person the actor playing Mabel really is going to change how this scene is experienced. And maybe you would say that it shouldn't, but I think that it does.
Yeah, and what this scene claims, right? This the holding of this story of love and passion, and visually holding it with someone who doesn't often get to tell, like someone at whose body is at a stage that body doesn't often get to tell that story, would be a really interesting statement for this play to close out with.
Well, yeah, absolutely. And it's fascinating to me that it ends there because, again, this is a new character to us. It's not it's the conclusion of a mystery. Who is this guy? But it is not a conclusion to a story with another character that we've found throughout the play. It almost feels like the play could end with a scene with her and Chandler, or it could end with Mabel in her 90s with her and Julia or Minty, because those are relationships we've become invested in over time. And David Bloom is new to us, but again, I do think part of what the play is doing is uncovering these kinds of secret stories, and so there's like a thematic reason why it concludes in that way.
Yeah, I think what it does for me, at least, is it centers it on the swim. It centers the story. Like we do get the mystery of David at the end of it, but the feeling for me when we jump, so we're jumping back in time throughout this whole play, back and forth. We jump over the swim when we're doing that earlier.
We never
on in the
see
play.
the swim actually happen.
Right. So we go from a scene where she says she's going to swim the channel at the end of Act 2, and then the next jump back in time scene is like 20 years later, and she has the trophy that her alcoholic husband breaks in an argument. And you're like, oh, we never got to see a swim. and
well, right. And the other thing that it is it's a interruption in the forward progression. Right?
Yeah.
Because up until that moment, anytime we go back in time, it is chronological, right? She's 10, and then she's 16, and then she's another age, and she's another age, and finally, she's in her 60s, and her husband has died. But now, at the very final scene, we go back in time to when she's 21 at this moment. So it's an interruption of all that. It's also like a major decision in her life. David essentially proposes, maybe not quite, on one knee will you marry me, but says you should come and be with me and leave the person you're engaged to, leave your family in America and come and be in Europe. And so the moment that she crosses the channel coincides with one of the major decisions of her life, which she will come to regret for the rest of her life. Even as this is one of those things about life, right? Like you regret decisions, but your life is the accumulation of those decisions. She clearly loves Julia and loves Minty deeply. And those people would not be alive if she had made this decision, a different decision, the one that she regrets. And so I find that the play has some really sharp, maybe subtle things like that to say about like the accumulation of life. Like it is possible to hold it as a major regret to have not done something differently, and to be very happy with the way that things came about, or happy with parts of the way that things came about. It's one of those, like, I wouldn't change this if I could, but I also regret not.
Yeah, for sure. There's lots of little facets in this play, lots of things that like evoke both nostalgia and memory and joy and happiness. Certainly, like where you are in your life when you watch this play, like what your descriptors are, affect how you receive this play. And so this play has so many things that jar loose and lead to great conversation. Excited that we got to have this conversation today. It is coming to its close on this particular podcast, but hey, would love as always to kick the conversation out to all of you. Would love all of your voices in this conversation as well. You can find us on the socials that we're on at the username @NoScriptPodcast. We also have a Gmail, noscriptpodcast@gmail.com. Find us on any of those sites. We'd love to keep talking about Pride's Crossing with you.
If you enjoyed this conversation or any of our other conversations, please recommend us to your family or friends. Anybody you know that likes discussions about writing, storytelling, theater, acting, themes, any of that kind of stuff, send them our way. They can find us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, all the places you get your podcast. Our Facebook page also has a link to a new episode every Monday that you can click and play from there. I hope you will be back next week for our special guest episode. It is an absolute treat. We will see you then. Until then, then, I'm Jacob here with Jackson. Thanks for joining us for No Script, the podcast.